splashed in the waves and swam with the dolphins, and they all lived happily ever. Oh, hi! Summer has finally come to sunny Carpinteria. And here am I stuck inside making videos about writing. I could be at the beach. But to make up for that, we're going to have extra special fun today. We're going to look at semicolons and colons. And I know this is just what you've been waiting to hear. So let's take a look in our workbook. No mucking around today. We'll get straight down to it. Page 72. Now, you will find that semicolons and colons are based on the same style of punctuation as basic comma rules. So if you're not sure about the comma rules, go back, take a look at them, master them. They are pretty simple. You just have to use them consistently. Comma rule 1, 2, and 3. And then come back and take a look at the colons and semicolons here. Okay, let's get started. We use semicolons with transitional phrases. However, they can also be used to add sentence variety to your work. Now, I've tried to be clever here because transitional phrases, what is that? However is a transitional phrase. Phrases like moreover and therefore, and we'll take a look at them shortly. But for now, let's just concentrate on the primary way that semicolons are used, and then we'll look at transition phrases. So we use semicolons with transition phrases. However, they can also be used to add sentence variety to your work. And just to remind you, we're always looking at the clause. They can. Subject, verb phrase. They can also be used. Okay? Subject, verb. We use. So always identifying clauses. Semicolon can be used. Subject, verb. So always keep that in the back of your mind. A semicolon is used to join two clauses together that deal with the same topic, specifically when the second clause explains or clarifies the first. So our first clause here is a subject and a verb. So we've got a clause that could be a sentence by itself. But it's a little vague. It's almost like introducing a topic here. The house seemed haunted. Well, why did it seem haunted? So there we have it. If you were lucky enough to stay the night in a haunted house, you would see that blood oozed from the walls, subject, verb. And we've got a comma and a conjunction, remember, so we're going to have a clause here. Ghosts screamed. Blood oozed from the walls and ghosts screamed in the night, subject, verb. So, my second clause and my third clause, we've got three clauses, right? 1, 2, 3. After the semicolon, whatever I put here has to clarify or explain what I put here. So for example, the surf was great. Okay, there's a subject verb. I don't know much about surfing, but the surf was great. The swell was 6 feet high. So the swell, there's our new subject, and there's our verb. So we have a clause explaining why the surf was great. 6 foot is pretty good around here for a swell. I don't think we get 6 foot ever. That would be a good surf day, I guess. If I were a surfer, I could be a bit more specific. I'm not. Here's a good one I can be very specific about. My family is eccentric. Subject, verb. This is page 71 in the textbook, if you have the textbook. And here is the title of the textbook. Everything you ever wanted to know about writing, but were afraid to ask. Okay. My family is eccentric. Now, it seems here in America that eccentricity sometimes is considered a bad thing. But in the British vernacular, it's kind of a compliment. It means you're unique and you do original things. However, in terms of my family is eccentric. Mother eats spiders and Dad swallows toads. How about that? That would be an eccentric family. In fact, we've gone a little bit monsters here. So subject, verb. And remember, comma and a conjunction here, signaling the reader that a new clause is going to follow. So this explains why my family is eccentric. The exam was easy. Subject, verb. And this explains why the exam was easy. Subject, verb. So we've got two clauses. Now these could be separate sentences. They could be little standalone clause sentences. However, by using a semicolon here, you're indicating to the reader, hey, I'm about to explain to you what I mean. Don't get your knickers in a twist. I'm about to explain what I mean. I was trying to repair my smartphone but had no luck. Subject, verb. The parts were unavailable. Subject, verb. Subject, verb, always. And this is telling the reader, here, I'm going to explain why I couldn't get it repaired. Corporations can be good and bad. Semicolon. Okay, corporations can be, that's a very broad statement. Okay, what do we mean by that? The semicolon tells the reader, hold on a minute, I'm going to explain. They provide subject, verb. They provide useful items such as this pen, such as this document camera right here, such as this laptop that I'm working on, such as this paper and the printer. They provide us with a lot of great stuff. But it's a well-known fact that profits are the bottom line, and sometimes they're not very caring about the environment and that kind of thing. Subject, verb. Why is one interesting? He's 7 foot tall and used to play for the NBA. That would make him interesting. So let's go back. Now that we've got this basic structure implemented and we understand how it works, the thing to remember is that this can be used to add sentence variety to your work. So when a reader sees one of these, they know that if you're using it effectively, they know that you have got your sentence structure down. And if you're using these correctly, your reader will trust your signaling. You'll be giving them a code on how your sentence structure works. And once they know that you know how to use semicolons as well as commas, they'll be thrilled with your work and they will want to read it. Okay, now that we've got that squared away, let's have a look at transitional devices and how they are used with semicolons. And actually, before we go on, you might be asking yourself, why bother with any of this stuff? Well, what you're doing is building a toolbox in your writer's box of tools so that when you are writing that piece of work that you need to present, and it needs to be professional quality, when it's clear that you understand these tools and how they work, it's an indication of how you think as a person and the respect that you have for your reader and the people that you're trying to communicate with. And so I think that conveys a very important message. And of course, the writing is much clearer when you have the correct punctuation and you know how to use it. So let's take a look at these transitions. When you use transitional phrases in your writing, you're indicating to the reader that you have developed a sophisticated way of expressing yourself. At least more sophisticated than simply using the basic conjunctions and, but, and so. So here we have semicolon use. Because you've progressed beyond basic sentence structure, the reader will be more likely to understand and accept complex ideas and thoughts that you express in your writing. Consequently, your work will become more convincing when you use transition phrases. And here we have a transition phrase and a semicolon. So what are transition phrases? Let's have a look at these. They can quite often be used to replace coordinating conjunctions. Words like and, but, and so, we can trade them out. For example, instead of and, we might say something like what's more, or moreover, or in addition, equally important, finally, furthermore. And these signal to the reader that we have a command of vocabulary and sentence structure. So it's a win-win. So and is used for additional information, but use it as a conjunction. So whereas, or on the other hand, however, nevertheless, on the contrary, by comparison. There's lots of these that you can bring into your writing. Conversely, meanwhile, in contrast. So instead of so, therefore, accordingly, thus, as a result, consequently, hence. When you want to indicate the importance of time, we have phrases like meanwhile, simultaneously, subsequently, immediately, previously, finally. When you want to emphasize a point, we say things like in fact and indeed, absolutely, definitely, obviously, unquestionably, emphatically. When you're presenting an example to the reader, of course, we say things like, for example, for instance, in this case, or to illustrate, as an illustration. So let's have a look at some of those in action. Sam got to work on time every day for 3 years. Consequently, his employer liked him. So here we have a transition phrase and a semicolon. However, Sam still did not. Poor old Sam. Subject, verb phrase. Subject, verb. All about clauses. Sam got to work on time every day for 3 years. Consequently, his employer, there's the subject, there's the verb, his employer liked him. So you see we're joining a clause here, and this clause is using a transitional phrase to introduce it after the semicolon. So this is the second way we use semicolons when we're using transitional phrases. Now, however, is one of our transitional phrases. It just takes the place of but. And you can start a sentence with a transitional phrase. You do not want to start your sentences with our basic conjunctions. It's a no-no. But you can use these transitional phrases that we've been looking at on page 76 in the reader. So, let's have a look at some further examples. Creating variety. And here's some examples again. Therefore, meanwhile, furthermore, however, thus, in addition, nevertheless, conversely, moreover, on the other hand, as a result. Henry was 93. Consequently, he could not run as fast as he used to. The bus was late. So we're going to trade out our conjunctions here. The bus was late. I didn't get to class on time. What's a good conjunction to use here? There it is, right there. And we have a comma after the transition phrase. Every day, he ate 10 donuts. He was still as thin as a twig. If we want to join these together, we could use one of our transition phrases. Now, if you ate 10 donuts every day, this is kind of contrary to what we'd expect. We'd expect it's more likely that you'd put on a few pounds. Okay, every day he ate 10 donuts. But conversely, we could say however here. That would work as well. Now, if we are going to join these together, this will remain a small h And this becomes one sentence. Every day he ate 10 donuts, however, he was still as thin as a twig. And this becomes a small h. Every day he ate 10 donuts, he was starting to feel unwell. We could put so in here. Every day he ate 10 donuts, so he was starting to feel unwell. This is what we would expect if you ate 10 donuts every day. So let's have a look in here. What have we got? Furthermore, however, thus, in addition. Some of these could work, but we're looking for something that would fit right in. As a result, that's a good transition phrase, or consequently would work as well. Comma afterwards. So semicolon first and a comma after whenever we use these transition phrases. Okay, that does it for semicolons. Let's move on to colons. Colons are used in three main instances. 1, when making lists. 2, when making declarative statements. And 3, when making smiley faces. Okay, so really only in 2 places. Unless you like making smiley faces, of course. Okay, so making lists. Look at the list above and note how the colon is used. So this is page 72 in the textbook. Okay, so it's telling us hey, look, there's a list being made up here, and there's a colon. So this is exactly how colons are used when making lists. Colons are used in 3 main instances, Shazam, and then we can list them as numbers. And we separate them with semicolons. So let's have a look at another example. 5 things were needed for the space shuttle launch to be a success. Shazam. As soon as the reader sees this, the reader knows that we're about to go into list mode, that the coding coming after this is going to be a list, right? So here are the things that are needed. Highly trained astronauts, semicolon. Highly trained ground crew, semicolon. Careful planning with emphasis on the smallest details, semicolon. A knowledge of the planet's orbits, semicolon. And, comma, of course, comma, a fully functioning space shuttle. So this is kind of a pretty sophisticated way of writing. We've got a variety of punctuation rules at play in one sentence here. Don't overthink this. I still believe that basic comma usage, if you can use commas effectively, they're going to cover 99% of the situations when you're writing. But this is good to know in case you're writing very technically styled pieces of work or you have a lot of information that needs to be delivered. So let's have a look at this again. 5 things were needed for the space shuttle launch to be a success. Semicolon, colon. Highly trained astronauts, semicolon, colon. Highly trained ground crew, semicolon. Careful planning. Here we have a comma. So you can see that sometimes we use commas in lists. And if it were a short, simple list, we would be using commas here. But you can see that these are quite complicated phrases here. They're more complicated than simply going to the store and buying eggs and butter and milk, right? So, and we want to be very clear here. So we are able to use other kinds of punctuation within this, and the reader understands that, okay, that's not the end of that. That doesn't end until we get to the next semicolon. A knowledge of the planet's orbits and, of course, a fully functioning space shuttle. So again, these signals here are for the reader. They're not for the writer. They are so that the reader can follow your thinking, and it's a courtesy to the reader to be able to do this kind of thing because it provides the utmost clarity in what you're trying to say. Okay, so let's make a quick list. I went to the store, I bought. So there's I bought eggs. So here's our typical old list. And we know this basic comma rule, right? But how about if I say this? I went to the store, I bought Gonna have a barbecue. What's that wood stuff they put in charcoal? Mesquite. Okay, so quite a complicated little shopping list. So, if it's clear that this is a long, confusing thing to read for the reader, I bought 3 pounds of ham with glazing, 17 cans of juice, the blackberry kind, 5 bags of charcoal with mesquite in it, and some wine. To clarify for the reader so that they go, okay, if we do this, the reader knows, okay, straight away we're going into a list. 3 pans of ham with glazing, 17 cans of juice, the blackberry kind, and a good reader will understand that that's where that subject ends, right there. And here's the new subject. So again, this is a signal code that lets the reader know what you're thinking. 5 bags of charcoal with mesquite in it, and some wine. Okay, so basically for lists, that's how we use colons and semicolons together. We also use colons when we're making declarative statements, which are usually statements of fact that you want to emphasize in your writing. For example, in a report from the White House regarding the Iraq War, the president stated, we will be out by Christmas. So making profound statements. Now we could put a comma in here and it would work just as well, but in formal style writing, it's good to know that this is a very formal style of punctuation. We'll have a capital letter here because president is a title of company declared. Okay. So there are really only 2 places we typically use colons. Declarative statements, and it's a very formal style, and when we're making lists to clarify for the reader. Okay, well that completes this episode of How to Write. My name is Shaun Sanders. You can get the book on Amazon, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Writing But Were Afraid to Ask. I highly recommend that you start at the beginning of this video series and go through the basic punctuation because it's not often taught properly. And once you've got that sorted out, this kind of thing is just the icing on the cake. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Keep on writing.